Welcome to another fun episode of Photoshop Party, and today we're lucky enough to have Mr. Jim Trapp joining us as our guest speaker. Jim has his Professional Photographers of America Master Photography degree, Craftsman degree, Certified Professional Photographer. He's the first Vice President, Professional Photographers of California, and is a PPC, Professional Photographers of California Master Photographer. He started entering competition work in 2013, so he's been doing it for 7 years, and currently is working on his Master Artist, which is probably one of the tougher degrees to get in PPA. So we're going to get rocking and rolling, and Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you want to hit your share screen at any time, you're more than welcome to.
Sure. I got to find it though. Oh, I see it.
Hopefully down at the bottom of that bright green button.
Cool.
All right, you're on.
Yeah. Thank you, and thanks to everybody for kind of showing up. This is actually a presentation that I did a couple weeks back as well. I had the people from Florida State Organization kind of reach out to me, and I said, yeah, I could probably put this together and kind of, and it wasn't very long. It was, I think theirs is only about 30 minutes. I don't know how long you go on this, Michael. About the same, or
about 45 minutes to an hour if you want.
Until I run out of gas or questions. Well, it sounds be about the same. So that seemed to go over very well. And so Michael kind of reached back out to me and he says, "What can you put it together for PPC?" And I said, "Yeah, that's pretty easy." So this is actually one specific module that I've done when I have taught any Super One Day, any workshops for black and white. Mostly my black and whites are all done in fitness or sports photography. It's something I just kind of liked. I gravitated towards. Next thing I know, people are contacting me to do it for them as far as commission work, and it just sort of snowballed and progressioned after that. And I actually started using this style in a lot of my competition work as well, and I think that's probably where it started to get recognition from a lot of people out there just pounding a lot of the iron, and so they like what they saw because it was a little bit different than what seen out there on what other people do. So that's kind of one thing developed after the other. So I just kind of give you a quick snapshot. So let me try to share this screen here. There. All right. Can anybody see the screen?
Not yet.
Okay. So let me see screen share. Host disabled, participant screen share.
Try it again.
Okay. Screen. Okay, let me see what I'm doing here. I've never done it. Okay, share. I think I've got it. There.
Hot dang. Cool.
There, we got it?
We got it.
Cool. So I'll just kind of keep talking along here and everything. And if questions do pop up, be so kind, I guess, to enter the questions in the chat box. Michael will rifle those back to me and we'll kind of answer them along the way. So if everybody's kind of cool with that. So this is an image that I actually captured. I'm trying to remember where I caught it at. Oh, down in Southern California when I did, when I spoke at, I believe, Channel Islands. So I just selected this one at random because it pretty much will represent something that I would be doing. So in this situation, when I first brought this up, I'm going, wow, that is one wrinkled background. But I actually photographed it knowing that it would be wrinkled. That's a different way I can show how to get rid of those. But being that what is made, so let me reduce this down out of my way here. There we go. So what I've done is already kind of preset this up to save some time. What I do is I use Nick filters to kind of go ahead and give me that starting point. There's several ways you can kind of do this. You can do it with a levels adjustment, and I'll show that as well. You can actually create, the basis of this even in Lightroom and bring it forward into into Photoshop if you wish. There's a couple different ways to achieve it. So what I do here is I just start with the raw file itself. I will go into the camera raw filter. Let me jump down here. I'll go into camera raw filter here. And here I will just do some of these global adjustments that I need to. Over here, adjust the exposure possibly. As you can see, here's the light. So I'll adjust maybe shadowing, highlight. Sometimes I'll even, if I'm unsure, I'll hit auto and just see what the system will deliver to me, and then I'll make adjustments from there. But for the most part, I want to kind of give myself a great foundation to work with. So I'll start it in there. And it's kind of like building a house. I mean, you definitely have to have a good foundation before you can start building things. So I got all of these. Oh, there it goes. So then that's my first step. I'll bring it into Camera Raw and get it looking about in this situation. So I'm back to here. So my very first step is I'm going to take my color image, and then I'm going to drop it into Nik Filters. And I go back into the Silver Effects Pro. Oh, I should have done this ahead of time. Sometimes when Nik opens up, it takes a while.
They're used to my computer crashing on me, so yeah, don't worry about that.
At this point, I play the Jeopardy music. So I may or may not have cropped the image. It doesn't really matter at this point because all this, can you guys see my cursor moving around?
Yes.
So all this stuff here, I don't really care about yet. Generally, sometimes I'll even deal with the whole image with all that stuff in the background because I really don't, I know I'm going to crop it out ahead of time, so I don't even care what it does. So if you look over here to my right panel, you're going to have all the different presets, black and whites. I started using these. So I start off with my neutral, which is right over here. And then what I do, wow, is this panel getting in my way or what? And I just go ahead, you know, I leave everything as a default setting. I just make it really easy on myself. And then I select the neutral panel. And if you look over here, I also have an underexposed and an overexposed. These are the three that I work with right here. And again, this is a very simplified process, and I've done it so many times, it doesn't take me hardly any time at all to knock these out. And again, that's just from just repetition of doing it. So, did I lose everybody? There it goes. So then, of course, it's going to make an extra one that I don't really want. I'll get rid of that in a minute as soon as it gets done. Okay. So here, it actually brought forward the image on that. It will automatically add a mask on this. That's kind of the way the design of the software was. So I think I removed this. So there it is. No, that's not it. Hang on. There we go. So when it does, I'm going to delete that. So when it does that, what you want to do is flip the mask. And the control on that, now I'm a Windows guy. So for PC, I don't know your language yet. So you kind of have to work with this. For Windows, it's Control I, and I think with Apple is Option. Is that right?
Command I. Command I.
So Command I. So that's it. And I flip every single one of those. So what I've done here is I've set up 3 layers. I've got my neutral layer, and then I go back in again. I don't need to do this each time, I hope. I go back in again. I hit the over preset, let it do its thing. I go back in again, and I grab the under preset. So I have each one of these kind of set up like this. And then I flip each one of these. So I set up my neutral down here at the bottom. Who's calling me now? Oh, well. So Then what I do is I'm just going to grab a brush. And I keep everything normal. I do not use 100% opacity. I don't know if anybody can actually see this, but I'll read you what it is. I bring this way down. I am maybe 8% on my brush opacity. Flow, I just leave it alone. Is everybody kind of familiar with the difference between flow and opacity? So if you think of flow, it's kind of like when you paint. You put it on, it builds. You put it on, it builds. You put it on, it builds. With opacity, it only goes to, you can keep on doing it. It's only going to show that 8% each time. It just kind of stops. So I kind of breathe this on very slowly. So once I've got my whole entire panel set up, I go up here to my, my over. Or actually, I may want to go to the under. I don't know. I can do it either way. There. So I'm a person who uses, I'm probably a little different than most, but I use, not only do I use the mouse, I also use a tablet. And I use a tablet really for detailed work, which is, it's the best for that. But a lot of times I will literally have my hand like this. So I have the mouse and then I have the pen. And this is kind of how I work. For other people, I know they swear by the tablet. That's perfectly fine. This is just how I do it. I find that the mouse is actually like 3 or 4 times faster. So if I'm doing production work, I'm all about the mouse. Like if I'm doing weddings, editing, bulk edits on those, I'll knock them out with a mouse and no problem. There's no way I would try it with a tablet. It's just my own style. So what I'm going to do is I take a look at my subject, and let me open that up a little bit. I got a 1 pixel. Everybody kind of see what I'm doing? So the other part, when I get ready to do this, what I always found is that I always had to use my magnifier tool. I had to zoom into the image and I had to zoom out. And every time I would get going on some really strong detailed work, I would go ahead and zoom back out. And then I would look at the image thinking, wow, that is way overdone. And then I'm reinventing the wheel. So what I do is I split my screen. So I go up here into Windows, I go to Arrange, and I go down to New Windows. And it's just going to jitter a little bit. So it's kind of setting it up. In other words, what it did, it kind of put one in back of the other. And then I go back up into Windows again, I go to Arrange, and I go 2 up vertical. So what this is allowing me to do, I can select either the left or I can select the right. I'm very, I do the same thing each and every time. So if you look at the very top here, this is highlighted, the other one is not, which means this window is active, this one is not. So if I now take my magnifying tool, I generally get an aha moment at this point, and I start bringing this up. This is where I can get into my detailed work, and I can visually go over here and see exactly if I've overdone it. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, these are just, I'll be honest with everybody that I didn't invent any of this stuff. What I've done over the number of years, I've taken bits from this and bits from that and pieces here and pieces there, and I put these all together from many photographers, and I've developed kind of what I do. So I think nothing really new has ever been invented in this planet when it comes to photography. So we all kind of do that, and this is exactly how I do it.
Jim, can you show what you did again to get the second window?
Yep. Let me go ahead and redo that back. Boom. Okay, so I start off with the window down here, right? So I go up into Windows, I go to Arrange, and I go down to New Window. So all that this does, there's actually another window on back of it now. So it does kind of like this, right? So I go back into Window again, Arrange, 2 up vertical. That's all there is to it. That make sense, Mike?
Yes, it does. I just wanted everybody else to see it a second time.
Okay. And I had the same thing going on when I did this in Florida. So they all go, "Oh, wait a minute, hang on." Start writing things down. So, and that's kind of normal. So now it's kind of where I'm going to get into the tablet a little bit. So I'm going to stay. So now that I've got this, I know that I'm going to want to start working on her arms a little bit. So as I used to do with film, this is kind of my techniques as far as dodging and burning. With dodging and burning, what that allows you to do to an image is you build in a lot of depth and you build in a lot of dimension. So if you think about it, we in essence have taken a two-dimensional object, and in our head now, it's visually as a three-dimensional object. So which is kind of neat about it. So in a digital world, this is in essence kind of how we do that versus, you know, putting the little wands over negatives and so forth. So I have tried this when I've used the dodging and burning tool. What I find that it does, it turns things just gray. It mushes, it takes pixels and mushes them around. When I do go in this scenario, what I'm doing is I'm taking the technology of layers and I'm taking it and I'm opening a hole on it and I'm exposing the layer below it. So in other words, I'm maintaining the pixels through the whole image. I'm not altering that at all. And I use a very low brush opacity to expose parts of it at different levels. So I know that may sound a little confusing, but here we go. So what I'm going to do is go to my, I'll start it with my over image. So this is the one that's overexposed, and I'm going to tap on it. And then what I do is I get my brush. I just make sure it's set up on the white over the, you know, the foreground, white foreground, and I've got a background over here. So then I'm just going to take this and I've got my tablet set up where I can do this like really quick. I have a, God, I don't even know the model of these things anymore. It's the Wacom, it's the medium tablet. It's got the little wheel in the center of it. And I can just spin this like there's no tomorrow. And then what I'm going to do here, since it's on the lighter area, what I'm doing is I'm looking on her skin tones, and I'm just going to come along and start. I don't streak it, I'm tapping it. So in essence, what I'm doing is I'm doing this. Can everybody see this? So I'm tapping it along that. So in fact, I'm actually just doing it with my mouse. And then with my other hand, I am spinning my wheel on my tablet to take the brush size and go down and up. That's why you're seeing it going so quickly. So it's kind of like what I said before. I've done so many of these, I can zip right past them. It doesn't take me very long at all. So I'm just kind of building up the highlights wherever they're at, kind of in there. And then if we have a highlight, we're going to have a shadow. So then I'll pop up to the under, and then I'll come in here on some of these shadows, and I'll bring them a little bit darker. And I will go through her whole entire body. You see how that's bringing it out on the left hand of the screen? And if I look over here to the right, it's way too much. Way, way too much. And if that's the case, just flip it and go back over it again. Back over it and bring it down. So I'm not going to complete the whole image, by the way, because you guys will be asleep in a heartbeat. So I'm going to go through here and do this pretty quick. And if you look, I don't know if you can see it over here in my mask, you'll start to see where she's appearing a little bit. And if you want to really see it, you just turn your layer on and off and you'll start to see it. So if you look over to that side of the screen, you'll see it pop on and off. And that's really what I'm looking for. So I can see an area right up into there. I'm going to bring this maybe a little bit darker right in there.
Jim, you're painting in black.
Oh, my bad. Which is why probably nothing was happening. There we go. So again, and you see how she's starting to pop now. So what I do is I'm going to go through her whole entire body piece by piece. Like when I get to the chest area, especially on ladies, I mean, we want to accent this a little bit, but not a whole lot. And all I'm doing is I'm flipping back and forth. That's about as simple as it gets. What really will separate this technique than other ones I've seen is when you spend the time on little tiny areas like this. If you spend the time, you're going to get really fast at it, and it will really make a big difference. Do you ever notice how boring it is to watch somebody do these demonstrations on Photoshop? It's like you're just kind of watching it going, okay, move on, dude. That's why I don't want to spend a lot of times you guys just watch me do this, because even I'll kind of fall asleep. So here, I'll just kind of darken her up a little bit right into there. And again, if you look over at her throat, you'll kind of see where it's starting to pop a little bit. And it's building in that definition. So some key areas, especially in fitness people, obviously is the abdomen area here. Whoops. I had the. So these little areas here, and you'll find in fit people, and I have no idea what they're called. If you pop them very slightly, that makes a huge difference, especially right here. Bring these out a little bit. This is how you give somebody six-pack abs like super quick. And all I'm doing, again, folks, is just tapping this. That's it. So again, if I do it again, you can start to see the definition on her stomach. And then I'll go along her arms, and I'll go, I'll put on some music, and I'll just, go through her whole entire body. Whoops. Sorry about that. Any questions on this so far?
One of the questions, can you, one person was asking how you link the 3 layers together, and I was going to type a response that you're working on the under, over,
yeah,
bring out the highlights and the shadows.
Exactly. So what happens is, if you look over into my layers panel, which is over here, every time I go back into Nick filters, it brings it back when I say I'm done. It brings it back as a different layer with that mask already applied to it each and every time. So literally every time I go in and do it, I bring it back and it just builds another layer on top of it. So these layers are set up basically automatically by Nick. Hopefully that answers the question. Not sure.
We'll find out shortly.
These little areas you see right in here on her, I don't really care how fit somebody is. That's probably muscle. If it was me and I was using that as a competition or a client, I would bring that in, and I just simply use Liquify on that. And Mike, I think you've got some videos on how you were using Liquify already. That's a real simple fix in Photoshop on that right there. But that's an area I would have done prior to even coming into this. I just happened to look down and see that she had it. With that Liquify filter as well, what I would have probably done, I may have popped her arms out a little larger, not a whole lot. Definitely this seam of the muscle I would have popped this seam of the muscle out a little bit and given just a little bit. These bodybuilders and fitness people, they spend an inordinate amount of time in the gym. And so I mean, I want to give them, I really want to make them feel good about what I'm doing for them. So I pop it just a little bit. You can get a little crazy. It's just enough to kind of help build that definition. That's all. So let's say she is completely done. When I first started doing this, it would definitely take me several hours. I'd go through it. Anymore, I'm done with an image less than an hour. I will just go right through it. For a competition style image, I will spend a lot longer time doing that. It's just kind of the way I roll. So let's say she's completely done now. So I'm going to consolidate these windows back. So again, I come back up into Windows. I go into Arrange, and I go Consolidate All Tabs. Click on it, and there she is. So she's back, kind of the way it was. So let me scooch this down a little bit. Boom. So since she's done, what I'm going to go to my top layer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a Stamp Visible Layer. What a Stamp Visible Layer does, it takes this whole entire layers, and instead of, it's kind of a reversal of flattening a layer. Except if I flatten a layer, I can't really reopen it back up again unless I go into the history palette, and it gets kind of a pain. So what I do in essence, I take everything below, see if you see this, and I come up here and I kind of lock it all into one layer. So on some of these composites that I have done, especially pursuing this master artist degree, I may have 40 layers deep. It's just kind of the way that stuff works. So if all of a sudden I'm going in here and I'm into 40 layers and I discover that I have a mistake, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I literally can just pull sections away and start building from where it is. So it's kind of a nice thing to know about when you need to use it. I may have do them a little bit more than probably I should, but I do. How the commands are on that, you may want to write this part down. I go Shift, and again, I'm going to speak Windows, Control, Alt key, and E as in Edward key. And as you see, what it's done is it's consolidated everything here in this one layer. So if I do anything to these layers down below, nothing will happen. It's all still locked in up to here. So if I did see something I needed to do, I'm going to have to take this layer and just throw it down to my trash can. Now I can make any changes here, and then I have to go back and recreate one again. So some of you might be asking, why am I doing that? Because now I can move forward to my next step. That's all it is. So normally you'd be going, okay, what am I doing? Flatten the layer and charge ahead. So once it's here, so what I've done is now I'm going to take this, I'm going to go back into the, actually I'm going to create 2 layers of that. Real simple, just copy it. That's a Control J is the command on that. I'm going to work with this layer here. I'm going to take this into my camera raw filter again. So for the longest time, up through version 2019, it was always a clarity slider. What a clarity slider did is mostly work on all of your midtones in an image. It just kind of, and it was so easy for people to get, take them way to the extreme. For some of the people it's been around for a while, there was a software called Lucius, and whew, that was kind of the, we found HDR, here we go. Let's take our slider, go way, way to the right. And people said, wow, that's art. And I'm going, wow, that's pretty interesting. So what Adobe did is they created this little bugger down here now called texture. Once I started playing with it, I went, oh, that I like. So it treats the image completely different. There is a difference in these 2 sliders. It has to do with the frequencies. So they kind of lost me when they started describing it. However, so I go into my texture slider and I just slam it. So if you notice what's happened here, she became like, now you see the definition going on here. But I don't want to do it because it almost looks overdone. It's overcooked. But I'm going to use the power of the layers and the masking to help me out with that. So it comes back. That's why I put this second layer up here. Going to do exactly the way I did before. Going to add a mask. I'm going to invert it. So it looks like it did before. And I grab my brush. I'm still at the 8%, but I tell you what, I can actually juice that up a little bit, 35, 40, 50%. Kind of let your vision be your guide at this point. I start off at 35. I know I can get some more out of it, but if I'm already at 80, it's like I can't go backwards. So I'm going to zoom up in here a little bit stronger. Hang on a minute. I'm going, why isn't she in black and white? Oh, I know why. Because these guys are on.
Your neutral needs to be in white.
Oh, that's right. That's right. There we go. Okay. So now I'll go back up in here. I'll do that stamp visible layer again. And there we go. I'm going to take that again quickly up back into my camera raw. Come on, baby. Take that. And I'm back. And there we go. Okay. Sorry about that, guys and ladies. All right. I'm going back up into my brush. I can split the screen, but I've done it enough to where I don't really need to at this point. So I get a big enough brush on this. That was the mask. And then that might be a little too much. 18%. So again, now I'm going to tap it again. I'm tapping it. See how her stomach's coming out? So what I don't want to happen is that I start affecting the garments that she's wearing. I don't want that. I don't want that to be the area that things are getting noticed. The same with this weight. I don't want that to happen to that as well, nor do I want it to happen to the background. I only want it to happen to her and the skin. But you see, it's coming out pretty good. Be careful on the chest. Definitely on the arms. And I could probably go up a little bit more on this in terms of my opacity, just so you can see the difference. So what I want to do is I want to center on areas that I want her to pop. The abdomen area is a definite. And all I'm doing, I'm just taking my mouse and I'm tapping on it. That's it. Now.
So are you hitting both the highlights and the shadows when you're doing that?
Yeah, well, actually, if you remember, what I'm doing is I'm exposing the textured layer.
So you're painting both areas at the same time?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Because my first steps, I would have already highlighted all my shadows and highlights. They would have already been done. So what I'm really doing is now I'm giving that punch on those, where it really starts to pop. And that's kind of how a lot of my images have been described, that the black and white pops. So, and that's kind of where I'm giving it right now. But if you noticed what's going on, let me show you. Boink, boink. Get the idea? So the other thing you need to kind of keep in mind a little bit, I also will do this to her hair, but not all over the place. I only do it in certain little areas. Just enough where you can see it provides that definition. So if you look at her hair, see how it's changing? The eyes just a bit. I mean, that's like really quick, and the same with the lips. Now she has a pretty kind of I'm going to kick booty kind of a feel, and that's really what I was looking for. And I kind of want to maintain that. However, I do have to keep in mind that she's a female versus a male. So the female, I still want to, and I got nailed on this in one competition, is that we still want to maintain kind of a femininity about her. So I really won't go in here hot and heavy on this technique in her face. I'm dropping it way down. I'm at 10%. So just a little, highlight the cheekbones, maybe into there, her nose just a pinch, just a little bit, just enough to give it a punch, but not much more than that. So that's really a kicker on how this does it. So again, here I go again. I'm going to hit that stamp visible layer. So it's a Shift Control Alt E again. And I'm going to give it one more. I'm going to copy that layer again. Boom. And now I will take it kind of my last step. I'm going to add kind of a vignetting to it, because if I look at it, I mean, it's a lot of real estate around her, and I really want the focus. When I want somebody viewing this image, I want them dead center right here. And how I get some of that is I'll add in vignettes, and there's about 1 million ways to do vignettes, and this is kind of a real simplified version how to do a vignette my way. I go up into the gradient tool, and I don't do much more than I do bring it in very gently into these, kind of into here. I definitely will bring it below her. Bring it up a little bit, because again, I want, and bring it down a little bit, just a little bit. And I'll get sometimes a little more creative on some of this stuff as well. Kind of about like this. So in essence, what I've done is kind of created this artificial kind of a hotspot. That's about how I make a vignette, kind of really quick. Needs to be a little bit more. And I'm just going to pop it back up. Now it's a little overdone, right? So that's the nice, powerful part of the layers. I'm just going to take it, and I'm just going to start lowering my opacity till I get it in there somewhat about there. Kind of about where I would bring it in at.
Jim,
Boom.
can you explain why you use 2 layers to do that, not just one?
Oh, on the vignette thing?
Well, you have layer 2, layer 2 copy, layer 1, layer 1 copy.
Well, I guess because I'm used to doing it that way, for the simple reason that notice how I did the masking up here. I could have put a mask on that. I'm sorry, but I was just used to stamp visible copy. I could actually do it here on the stamp visible layer.
Right.
And again, that's, I guess we're going to call it my own insecurities about screwing things up. So I just created it on this copy of where it is right here. So I'm bringing, oh, there's my reason, duh, Jim. Because I'm using the opacity underneath it. So I kind of use it like a mask a little bit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I could have used a mask, I guess, but it was just, again, this is just how I do it over and over and over again. So I'm just kind of used to doing it that way. And that's kind of about how I do it. So that is really kind of how I pop those black and white images in kind of a real simplified area. So kind of about like that. So if I take it from there and I turn all of these off, I don't know if I can do a side-by-side comparison here compared to where I started with. So that's kind of where I ended up at, and that's kind of where I started from. So even if you look down here in her abdomen, it completely changed. Everybody seeing that difference? And again, a lot of these changes, they don't have to be like super shift. It can be, I like things that just kind of gently bring it in. So that's how I do my black and white stuff.
Okay, does anybody have questions? I think there's a question about when you cropped it, nobody noticed it being cropped at that time, taking out the light and stuff.
Oh, it's because I already had it cropped. I didn't flatten it as a crop. So Photoshop, when you take it into Camera Raw, is going to read the original file unless I commit to it.
Okay.
So what you saw in Camera Raw with the light in there is probably how I photographed it. Or I may have cropped it a little bit in Lightroom and brought it into Photoshop. It's what I left over. But the cropping is like really simple.
Yeah, square crop. Other questions?
On this image here, yeah, square crop kind of, it keeps the viewer centered straight into which is where she's at. For this image, square works very well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions out there? Now is the time to jump in. Going once.
There's something there.
Okay, there's one. How would you use increased contrast?
Yeah. Well, what I'm doing, excellent. The overall way that I do it does increase the contrast itself. So the contrast is really just a difference between, your lights and your darks. So I don't want a real heavy contrast, what you would think of as a heavy contrast, like you would see in Camera Raw. See, if I took this and I took contrast, it's going to look really that. It gets, and if I lighten it up, by the way, this is what's referred to as muddy, if you ever heard that term. And this is overdone. So I suppose you could kind of tweak it a little bit if you wanted to bring in maybe the darkness of the background. It's not kind of a direction I would want to head in, but I'm sure you could play with it. I find that this texture slider gives me exactly what I need to do. That I see, even just doing this little bit just really takes her muscles and just gives it that beautiful popness of it. So even on this clarity slider, I mean, it's not, ugh. So does that answer a question that they had, I guess?
I believe it does.
Okay. And again, folks, she's not completely done the way that I would do her. I'm trying to remember if I actually have one of hers completed. If not, I might be able to finish this up and show you exactly my end result. And I can post it on the PPC site.
And if you worked this in black and white, could you then see the improvements if you decided it should be a color image?
I make that decision before I've even photographed her. I would lean a fitness towards black and white for the simple reason that I think it tells the story better. And again, these are my own opinions. It tells the story better, and I'm able to pop her stronger. When you take an image and you remove the color out of it, the color sometimes can be distracting. For instance, in this image here, what color did she even have on that? Because I tell them what to wear. It was black. So sometimes if she comes in and she has a red kind of a gym bra, I'm going to want her to wear that, because in black and white, that's going to go to deep darkness. See, if I was going to be photographing this for a competition, I would have done something completely. In Photoshop, I would have changed out her pants. I would have just made them black. And I'd done that in Photoshop. I think the color can sometimes be distracting in an image. If you're trying, what's the word I'm looking for? If I'm trying to achieve this effect, I think visually it's a lot more effective in black and white versus color. And again, that's my opinion. But if this is also for a, maybe, and I've had this happen to me before, where I was approached by a gym to start doing these type of photos for their inside of their gym, and I use Bay Photos Exposer to print those on. So what they're doing is they're trying to show before and afters. So I was using these techniques. I was showing the color. It's like those diet TV commercials where they show the before and after. It's kind of like what I was doing. So the black and white just screamed, and I was showing the before color. So
cool.
But I would have made that decision prior to even photographing her. So, but again, that's one of those artistic kind of decisions that people make. I would have. So, but that's kind of a tough one because I've been doing this for a long time, and that's how my head would see it, and I would go in that. Because when they get into my studio, unless there's a specific request and we would normally be talking about that, I would make the decisions on all of this stuff, especially if I brought somebody in knowing that I'm going to be using this as a competition. It's 100% me. It's nothing about them. They are my model. Then they'll do what I need them to do. So.
And another question just came up. Is there a reason why you're using Nick to do the black and white versus using Camera Raw?
You can do it. Again, if you remember the beginning of this, I said there's several different ways to achieve this. You can use Camera Raw. Just take your exposure filter, go up, create a layer, take the next one, create it. I use Nick because I found it to be quick and fast, and no other reason than I just use it. They've been playing with that Silver Effects software for many, many years, and they have dialed it in. So when they say an over and an under, I know that's probably one stop over and one stop underexposed. So when I use like a Camera Raw filter or something, I'm kind of guessing at it. But the other thing about using Nick is I know that if I use the over and the under for everything, I am going to get a very consistent look in my images. I'm working from the solid base point of everything. If I go into a Camera Raw filter and do the same thing with an exposure, might be off a little bit, might be under a little bit. So I don't know. That's kind of how I would do it. Now, you can kind of do the same thing with the layers, adjustment layer. So if I take this, my top one here, and I take an adjustment layer like this, all I'm going to do here is take this and go up, to there. And I take it, and that's one. And then I'm going to add another one. And I'm going to go down with it. There. There's my two layers. And again, I'll just invert those. That's another way to do it. So it doesn't give me that consistency of the images. You know, again, I may hit the mark just right or not, but I played around with this one day and I said, I can kind of do that as well. So I figured I would show people this if they didn't want to go out and spend the money for Nick. I find it very useful when I did, but that is another way to get around this. You can use a levels adjustment. So hopefully that answered that question.
I believe it did.
Perfect.
Any other questions out there? If you want to scream them out, go ahead and scream them out instead of typing them out. Going once, going twice. Cool. Well, thank you, Jim. Great class. Learned a bunch.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And hopefully we'll be seeing you again shortly.
Yep.
Maybe have you do another class for us.
Yeah, we'll just figure out a subject, or if people kind of have different areas. Is there another question popped up?
Oh, they're just thanking you.
Oh, very welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim.
I mean, Sharon, it's kind of how I learned a lot of this stuff. So I understand the benefits, especially in belonging to organizations like this. You know, you get to meet people and, you know, you're stuck on something. Honestly, in fact, a while back, I was talking to Michael about, how would I, if I was going to teach a basic Photoshop class, where are some areas that I could do it, and belonging to different, either local or state organizations is how you get to meet everybody. That's how I got to meet my roommate. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for doing this, and
Absolutely.
We'll see everybody in 2 days on Thursday with, I think we're talking about Nick Filters, as a matter of fact. So Thursday
Is that Larry
at 1 o'clock.
going to be doing that?
I'm going to try and talk Larry into doing it. If he's not available, I'll do it myself. And
Very good.
always try and talk Diane Costello to doing a program for us as well. Hopefully
Yeah.
she's listening in. We'll get more people teaching, so you don't have to listen to me all this time.
Well, you've got a very strong knowledge base on Photoshop, so.
Thank you. My head just grew 3 sizes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in a couple of days.
Thanks for listening in, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.